În continuare, am onoarea de a-l invita pe profesorul Klaus Miesenberger de la Universitatea Johannes Kepler din Linz, Austria. Domnia sa este o voce importantă la nivel european în domeniul accesibilității, tehnologiilor asistive, incluziunii digitale și designului pentru toți. Intervenția domniei sale este dedicată proiectului ATHENA și aduce în discuție o temă extrem de relevantă pentru mediul universitar. Modul în care accesibilitatea și principiile designului pentru toți pot fi integrate în învățământul superior. Această perspectivă este importantă pentru noi, deoarece universitatea nu are doar responsabilitatea de a oferi servicii pentru studenți cu dizabilități. Universitatea are și responsabilitatea de a forma viitori profesioniști care vor proiecta spații, servicii, tehnologii, politici publice și practici educaționale. Dacă accesibilitatea este integrată în formarea universitară, impactul ei poate depăși spațiul unei singure instituții și poate ajunge în comunitate, în profesii și în societate. Dear Professor Klaus, you have the floor. Prezentarea domniei sale va fi în limba engleză. Pentru cei care întâmpină dificultăți, vă rugăm doar să ridicați o mână sus și unul dintre colegi o să vă aducă căști pentru traducere. Ok, please.
Thank you, Marian. Will my slides be presented on the screen? Thank you. Perfect. Perfect technology. There is a question on the right side. Okay. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for having me. This person, Marian, is responsible that I'm here. Thank you very much. It shows that it's some time ago that we met first time, 2008, if I found it right, the image. Thank you very much. Marian asked me to talk about, first of all, the activities we are doing at our university in higher education, how we make at our university higher education accessible. And I'm very proud and how to say, really, I'm amazed what is going on here at this university. So to say, I'm a bit framing what is already also done here at this university. But the second aspect I want to bring into is making accessibility a topic in higher education itself. As already said by Marian, and that's the aim also of the project Accessible You. If we really want to implement inclusion, accessibility has to be a concern and the responsibility of everybody, and we need talent. We need expertise at all levels, and higher education institutions have to take over the responsibility to include accessibility into the different subjects. So to say, I'm a computer scientist. If somebody studies computer science and goes out into practice, he has to have a basic understanding of accessibility. What is the implication of the systems which he is implementing on the diversity of people in society, including those with disabilities? And that's actually what I'm doing, and that's the shocking truth, since more than 40 years. I had the privilege to start in the late 80s with the activities on, it was not called accessibility at that time, assistive technology for people with disabilities. And when I started to talk about the subject at that time, a typical reaction was people were bored. They thought that's not of importance in our society. There are special schools, special institutions, they should care about it. But then legislation came along. European Accessibility Act today, prior legislation, and the fear came along. Oh my God, how should we deal with this issue? And finally, nowadays, a typical reaction, somebody else should take care about it. Somebody else should have the knowledge, but nobody's actually really willing to take over responsibility for accessibility in our society. The situation is changing, but still there is a strong need. Taking over the responsibility needs excellence, needs knowledge, needs understanding about the specialities of accessibility in practice. And therefore, we are really happy, we are really proud to have the initiative Accessible EU, where the mission actually is, not only in higher education, everywhere, to bring accessibility into practice, to make it the new normal of everyday activity, to reflect, to consider the requirements of the broadest range of people, including those with disabilities, in all our activities. Thank you for the comment, but I didn't understand, sorry. What I'm doing actually, I do very similar things like Marian is doing at this university. I started, as said, in the 80s. We focused already at that time on people with disabilities. We thought, as computer scientists, there is something special in this new technology which could help people with disabilities. And when we contacted them, they said, that's wonderful if you do research, but when is something happening in practice? And that's what we took by heart. That touched us. And what we said, what is closer to us than making the own courses of studies which we are offering at university accessible? And this was our starting point. And we recognize how complex it can become to make your own lecture notes, your own presentation tools. We had no PowerPoint at that time. We used normal handwritten slides, how to make them accessible. Challenging issues, but we enjoyed the challenge as researchers and developed something like a service infrastructure, making all these materials as accessible as possible for all the different groups of people with disabilities. And our research as computer scientists, we defined out of these requirements. How can we make the service more efficient? How can we develop better assistive technologies for people with disabilities that they can better take part in the process of studying at university? And the third thing, which was a long fight, including accessibility as a subject into the courses of computer science. And it took me till the year 2007, from 1989, when I started to teach, till 2007, that accessibility became a compulsory subject for every computer science student at our university. Is accessibility a compulsory subject here when somebody studies computer science? Good question. Is it necessary? Is it not necessary? But I think if we talk about 15 to 20% of the population, a growing number, an aging society, accessibility has to be part of the skills of every engineer, of every designer, and of many other subjects. I come back to that when I talk about the Project Athena. So it's a simple thing what we are doing. Equal access for everybody at university, but the issue is when you go into the details, the complexity starts. The first thing, it is more than just the personal medical situation. People with disabilities, when they come to university, they want to experience themselves as full members of the university. They want to experience higher education. I have here a figure from the World Health Organization about the International Classification on Function and Disabilities, might be known, and they describe, and that can be used for that, they describe 3 levels which are concerned with disability. It's the impairment, it's the medical level, which we address with rehabilitation, with assistive technologies, the individual medical level, but that's not all. We also have to address the environment. The assistive rehabilitation technology has to match with an environment which their technologies which they are using, that is really usable and accessible. Accessibility has to be taken into account. And the third level is, and disability is always a social issue, is the reduction of prejudices, is the question of accepting equal communication, working on the social inclusion of people, which is not a technical issue. The first two layers we can address with technology, but the actual inclusion, acceptance of people as they are, this is independent of any technology. That's a question of our culture, of our social environment which we are developing. Higher education is not only a library, accessible materials. Higher educational is a social, cultural, leisure, sports activity, religious activities, whatever we experience as students, as teachers at university, we are living at the university, and this all aspects have to be taken into account. The second thing, studying is more than, or inclusion is more than dealing with one minority, people with disabilities. Again, the World Health Organization distinguishes sensory, physical, cognitive, communication, psychosocial illnesses as categories. When you go a bit deeper and read about it and make cross-calculation, we come to 1,400 categories in the international classification. I don't like the classification they are using. Why? When you have the term sensory disability, it includes hearing, it includes vision, and for service provision, totally different requirements. We have to use a different one. And I think that's more general nowadays. We use a classification for our services for vision, and also when we talk about people with vision impairment, a blind person has considerably different requirements than a person with low vision. Adapted visual access or access via audio and braille or a mixture of that, totally different requirements. Deaf people, sign language interpretation, thank you for the wonderful job you are doing. Or hearing equipment to adapt the sound, totally different requirement, not only in educational settings. And the same with motor disabilities. The term physical disabilities for me is misleading because vision problems, blindness, is most often, when it's not cognitive blindness or cognitive vision problem, is also a physical problem. So therefore, our structure, vision, hearing, motor, cognition, speaking, chronic illnesses and so on, might be an approach, but it shows the complexity of individual needs of every user which we have to address. And then we have also what comes to the service provision, units, aging issues, migration background, and in particular functional limitations. At our university we have many students, they have an accident, they have a disease, they have a surgery or whatever, and for a certain time they have problems in writing, they have problems in doing exams, they have problems in attending the lectures, and they also expect, like students with disabilities, a service which allows them to go on with their studies. The third thing, it's more than just 6, 8, 10 semesters of studying. What is important in service provision, when you start at the beginning of the first semester, most often you can be sure the first 2 semesters are lost. You have to start with service provision 1 year, 2 years before the students come to university. The university, I think it's the same here in this wonderful country, is totally different than a school environment. Everything is organized in school. Then you come to the university, you are responsible to find the courses, you are responsible to find your teachers, everything you have to do yourself. Complex for everybody. A barrier for people with disabilities, which often leads to failure already at the beginning. Where should I live? What is the housing? What are the mobility options? A lot of things around daily living which have to be organized, and that has to be done before. Another issue is counseling. What can I study? What should I study? Do you know what people with disabilities hear when they ask, can I study this or that? Most probably 90%, oh, that's not possible. That's too difficult, too many problems. They only learn about what is not possible, but very hard to find an objective analysis, what are actually the possibilities, what are the risks and challenges, and based on educated information, making a good decision what to study and where to study. This counseling, also in my country, is a thing which is terribly missing, the cooperation between education, school education, and then the transition to university. Preparation, financing, social contacts, a lot of things, whatever you can do before increases the possibility to be successful in higher education. And we know the dropout rate of people with disabilities in higher education is considerably higher, close to 50% higher than with normal students. And this is not due to the issue that they are not skilled. That's due to the issue that these, in particular, preparatory issues are not taken into account. During the studies, a lot to be done, and then also the question of the transition to the labor market. Is our service infrastructure responsible that a student with disability is able to do a proper interview, how to present my disability to an employer? Very complex questions, and again, I think, when it's time to go to the labor market, it is too late. You have to start half a year, 1 year before the situation is there. And this also asks the question, is the university itself a place where people with disabilities can work? This is a major project we are doing at our university, because what we identify all over Austria in a study, there is something like a glass ceiling. We have a lot of students with disabilities. They do one master, a second master. But when it comes to employment as a researcher, they are discriminated. They don't get a chance. Why? Prejudices are still there, besides all the service infrastructure. How can we address the situation that people with disabilities can get a career at university, in the administration, as researchers, as teachers, at all levels, that we have equal opportunities also on the labor market? And higher education, I think, should develop the role models, how this could work in practice, in inclusion at the labor market. The fourth thing we are confronted with, and this is still a misunderstanding. Services are more than just an accessible library, making books, making slides, materials accessible. It is, of course, these materials, but also lab situation, software, tools, exam situation, excursion, exchange programs, placement, built environment, as mentioned by my colleagues. There are many different dimensions of accessibility we have to address. And the sixth thing, it is more than just a service. It's not only the service itself, it is a question how we bring the issue into the topics which are taught at university. Accessibility as a topic in higher education. If accessibility is not respected in the curricula, as Thomas Kuhn, a former famous philosopher of science, said, what is important is in the curriculum. Is accessible in the curriculum? If not, it seems that it has no proper recognition and acceptance in our society. IT specialists, architects, sociology, education, care, therapy, medicine, business, economy. There are a lot of courses of study. Do they include accessibility? These are issues which we have to question, because when we want to implement accessibility in society, these experts taking over responsibility in our society in the future, they need this knowledge, how accessibility can be implemented. And this is what I will talk about later on a bit about Athena, if some minutes remain. So what we see, service is not only a direct work with students with disabilities, it is, I call it something like a change management. How can we change in our society that we work in a social situation with people with disabilities towards developing accessible environments where people can more and more work independently, live independently themselves, that they can manage their situation themselves based on accessibility. We need a strategy for that, which has to come from the rector's level, from the management. We need a mission statement where we want to be step by step. We have to account responsibilities, who takes over in what domain of responsibilities. We need the resources, no question. We have to educate the specialists, we have to bring it into the curricula, as said, and we have to consider where are the experts. We can't do everything ourselves. There is special expertise for every group, 1,400 categories, very individualized requirements. We need the expertise of the special institutions which are around in our society, and we have to make them work and invite them to cooperate to make our environments more accessible. Where we are, I only mention a former project on self-evaluation on e-inclusion in higher education. Only a small thing, but we always have to reflect where we are in these terms of making higher education institutions more accessible, more open for people with disabilities. And in this context, we are developing and permanently reflecting and further developing our services for students with disabilities. I like to describe it as a pyramid, as said before. Why? Because the pyramid demonstrates you need a strong base. What you can do before the actual course is starting, what is sorted out before, makes the experience of inclusive education really much better. If you have to deal with your housing, if you have to deal with mobility, if you have to deal with orientation, when the courses are already on, you cannot really start study. You have to sort out these things at the beginning. The second thing mentioned by my colleagues, what you need is really a proper assessment of the situation. Of course, of the student, of the requirements, of the assistive technologies, of the skills, and prepare them. If a student starts in architecture, in chemistry, whatever subject, they use very special notations. They use special methodologies, techniques, and tools. If you have to learn them, if you have to make them accessible when the course is started already, the probability that you fail is very high. You have to do this at the base of the pyramid. Assessment, training before you start. Then during and after, and you see on the left side here, described beside the pyramid, accessibility. The more you can be sure that all the books which are needed can be ordered from the bookshop in an accessible format, the more time, the more resources you have for special questions like making music scores accessible. I can't expect the publisher to make music scores accessible for a blind person in Braille. But I can expect that the text is provided in an accessible manner. The more we bring to the accessibility side, to the mainstream infrastructure, the more we can focus on the very special individual needs of our students. And this is always case management. Every person, as we all are, every situation, every disability is different. We need to personalize the approaches, and we have something like case management. At the moment, we have about 480 students with disabilities where we provide services. None of them is the same. We had thousands over the years. You can't take one. You can take them as a model, but you always have to be careful and have to look at the individual situation to address the requirements. And the key thing, of course, our responsibility, our organization has to be reduced, and we have to educate, support students that they can manage their situation independently. If they are able at the end of their studies also to take care about their situation as a person with disabilities, then we reached the goal, the ultimate goal, that they also are able to manage inclusion themselves in society. Do I have some minutes still? Thank you. The Athena project, and this relates to the one thing, and I think a very and more important thing, making or bringing accessibility into the curriculum. We made already, I think in 2007, some first pre-studies around Europe in different countries, and we looked in particular into courses of studies which had a relation to people with disabilities, special education, care, and we were looking, is there a mention of accessibility? We found only one course all over Europe where accessibility was mentioned. It was my own course, which we found at that time. But this gave us a sign. It is necessary. We talk about 15-20% of the population. We talk about ourselves. You guys are mostly young, but I'm very soon in a situation that accessibility measures are important. When you are 65, you have a probability of higher than 50% that in the next 5 years you are confronted with a disability, severe disability, that you need accessibility measures at the computer. Complex calculation. The simple truth, aging is related with disabilities. So accessibility, we work for ourselves. I expect that my banking is accessible. I don't want my wife to do my banking. That's my thing. It has to be accessible. When I lose my vision, I don't know. I hope not. But the probability is there that my vision blurs, that my hearing gets worse, that my dexterity of activities might be affected, be it a stroke or whatever, and therefore accessibility is the measure to keep our independence. And therefore it has to go in all aspects also of education, that we design, develop our society in a way that it can be used, as said, by the broadest range of users, including those with disabilities, and in particular those when getting older. Getting older, the golden ages is wonderful, but we have to be aware more than 50% are confronted when aging with a disability, and therefore bring it into the curricula, driven by the European Disability Forum, the European umbrella. Therefore, it had considerable political impact. Why? I already mentioned. Accessibility is accepted legally, it's there, we have the tools. It's not rocket science. It is a question of implementing in practice. It is universal. We need professionals in the future who are able to implement accessibility on an everyday basis. It has to be the new normal, that applications, that environments, that rebuilding or whatever is accessible. And we must not forget, accessibility contributes to general usability. We might be in a situation for a certain time where accessibility benefits to general usability. What we did, in short, we looked into the state of the art. We redid the study, which we did in 2007. We asked the question, is accessibility part of curricula? The methodology, collecting curricula, sitting down and analyzing them. 84 curricula got analyzed, 21 in the participating countries. The outcome, if accessibility is there, it is a footnote to another aspect, like in computer science, to user interface usability. It is not really properly addressed. The second thing, if accessibility is there, it is an elective subject. Students might get into it. Teachers might take it up, but it is not compulsory represented, and also not in special education, also not in care provision or whatever. It's simply not respected in the way as we would expect it in relation to the legal situation we have and the societal need of inclusion. We looked into different domains like education, social sciences, business, health, arts and humanities, ICT, architecture. Different aspects are mentioned, but no comprehensive approach towards accessibility. Evidence, yes, the mentioning of accessibility, diversity is there. The professional implementation and compulsory use of accessibility knowledge is not respected. The second thing we did, therefore, Athena developed recommendations for the curriculum development. We had expert consultations. We did 9 focus groups, developing a set of model curricula to be presented to decision makers in higher education, to evaluation, quality assurance authorities, that they should consider accessibility as a quality criteria in higher education. Promotion of accessibility should be done, model curricula, and then we had specific recommendations for policymakers, for quality accreditation agencies, educational leaders, program creators in higher education, for instructors and teachers, and also recommendation for end-user organizations, highlighting the role of end-user organizations, care centers, rehabilitation centers, assistive technology centers, that they should be willing and support better inclusive or better inclusion of accessibility into higher education. A lot to be talked about. I only can mention the URL of the project, which is there if you are interested. And with this, if interested, we run a conference every second year, which has also a track on universal learning design, technically oriented. I come from computer science, therefore, and with this, thank you very much for your attention, and I hope the one or the other thing is useful for you, for your future. Stay inclusive, be inclusive. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Klaus, and thank you very much for the picture. Please send to me. I think so I forget that picture. Don't tell anyone no more. Okay, thank you. It's okay. De fapt, prima ieșirea mea ca și tânăr doctorand a fost în Austria, la Linz, împreună cu Oana, pe care Oana Tufar, și care este interpretul nostru astăzi în limba semnelor române, împreună cu Mihaela, care fac switch. Și am fost pentru prima dată la Young Research Consortium, în ICCHP, care anul acesta se ține la Brno, în Republica Cehă. Vreau să salut, pentru că nu mi-am dat seama mai devreme și a trebuit să întreb, vreau să salut pe Laura Runceanu. Și de ce vreau să salut public? Pentru că l-am întrebat pe Adi cine e, că am văzut că mă salută, dar n-am știut cine e. Acum foile mele scrise la 24 ca font și tot le văd dublu și triplu, așa că de-aia citesc cu greșeli. Laura, mulțumim că ești astăzi cu noi, n-am știut, e o surpriză și o să vă explic de ce vă prezint pe Laura Runceanu. Laura Runceanu a fost colegă cu noi în Departamentul de Psihopedagogie Specială și ea a fost cea care a pus bazele Centrului pentru Studenți cu Dizabilități și după primul an s-a transferat la Comisia Europeană, la Institutul de Cercetări, cred că din Italia, dacă țin eu bine minte. Mulțumim, Laura, că ești aici, ne-ai făcut o surpriză, pentru că Centrul pentru Studenți cu Dizabilități are o cărămidă pe care are și numele tău, cu siguranță, și îți mulțumim pentru asta. Klaus, încă o dată mulțumesc mult pentru tot ceea ce faceți și chiar noi ne-am luat niște notițe ca buni studenți ce suntem. Și colaborarea noastră este de foarte mulți ani și ne bucurăm pentru asta.